Thank you both very much for appearing before our committee today and for your efforts in the submission as well. I'd like to invite you both to make a brief opening statement if you wish to do so, and then after that I'll be moving to committee members to ask questions of you.
Madam Chair, Deputy Chair, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony to this very important inquiry today. The matter under review is a vexed one because the provisions of the Social Security for disability purposes does not exist in isolation, but instead is inextricably linked to public sector invalidity benefits and the taxation thereof. Like the political adage that there are three pillars of retirement income, namely superannuation, personal savings and the age pension, so are there three legs to the rickety bar stool that underpins public sector invalidity, namely superannuation invalidity benefits, compensation and social security. As the committee may have gleaned from our submission and that of the embedded references provided, we firmly assert with authority that the Commonwealth Superannuation Corporation and the Commissioner of Taxation have not borne faithful allegiance to the law for upwards of nearly 40 years, resulting in a massive error in public administration that is 5 times greater than that of robo-debt, not only in monetary terms but also in the lives lost to suicide because of financial deprivation caused by the ineptitude of these hapless public institutions. With apparent ministerial complicity, these public institutions, together with the Department of Treasury and Finance, have acted arbitrarily and capriciously in producing false narratives, misleading statements to the House of Representatives, the Senate, representative organisations and vulnerable constituents, resulting in the legislative theft of the accrued rights of approximately 32,000 public sector invalidity recipients, 10,000 of whom are veterans, and denying the prospective rights of every contributor to public sector superannuation in what can only be described as a conspiracy to defraud. As such, we call upon this committee and the Senate as a whole to refer this egregious matter forthwith to the Australian Federal Police and to the newly created National Anti-Corruption Commission for further investigation, because as God is our witness, the law has been clearly broken. We tender this statement into evidence and now welcome the committee's questions.
Mr Campbell, do you have an opening statement?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank
you. Mr Thornton, you have raised some quite serious matters. I just need to take some advice from my Secretariat about the appropriateness of me responding to them on behalf of the committee. I'll do that in a moment, but I do just have a couple of broader questions for you. In your submission, you say that invalidity benefits are compensatory in nature and should not be considered pensions or income streams. Could you just explain your thinking on that for us a bit further, please?
Mr Campbell.
Mr Campbell, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, an invalidity benefit is distinctly different in nature to an ordinary retirement benefit. We also spoke to the critical error or the baseline error which is occurring at the moment with respect to the treatment of invalidity benefits in various areas of law. So, particularly in this area, social services have admitted in their submission that they have treated an invalidity benefit as though it's a lifetime pension and applied the lifetime pension rules to an invalidity benefit when in fact it's not a lifetime pension. Yeah. What's come out is the statements that are made from Parliament are such that Douglas was an anomaly, and it's sort of, you know, the courts have made an error here at law, when in fact the courts have actually highlighted this error in public administration that's been going on for some 40 years, in the sense that an invalidity benefit, which is reviewable and can cease, and under common law principles, is not a lifetime pension and cannot be considered so. That also came out in the Douglas decision. So what we've got is a payment that's not a lifetime pension being treated as though it is a lifetime pension in these various areas of law. So veterans, including myself, I represented myself at the Federal Court without any legal help in the family law side. Government's response was retrospective legislation to ensure that they could continue to treat a non-lifetime pension as though it was a lifetime pension, and this is what the Social Security Act and this bill is seeking to do as well. It's seeking to, in easy terms, a lifetime pension's an apple and a non-lifetime pension's an orange, and they've treated an orange as an apple for so many years. The courts have gone, well, this is actually an orange, not an apple, so now they're producing legislation to say that we can continue to treat an orange as an apple. And that's to the detriment of the veterans. We're talking about our most disadvantaged, disabled members of public service, in particular with this bill, with our veterans. And when you go back to the framework of the legislative framework that was created back in the 80s and 90s, it's very different to how it's being implemented and treated today. Social Security was supposed to be that third leg of the rickety basketball, so that if people, we're talking about people that may have been injured early in their life, their basic income support might be 75% of their retiring wage, and if that wage is low to begin with because they've fallen over early in their career, they've got no capacity to save throughout their lifetime. So they're essentially locked into a lifetime of living like an old age pensioner for the entirety of their life, with no, and that's someone that has to raise a family on a very low income through no fault of their own, through service to their country and being injured as a result of that service. So that there's quite a few issues that surround the treatment of invalidity benefits, and the family law side is one of them. I could answer questions to that. I know it's not within the remit of this hearing today, but it all comes back to this root cause of what is an invalidity benefit and what is a retirement benefit. So when you look at the taxation system and when the superannuation system was set up, there was a carrot and a stick. And the carrot was superannuation is supposed to be for a person to survive in their retirement years, and if you use it for your retirement, the carrot is you get it tax-free. If you access your superannuation, retirement superannuation prior to retirement age, the stick is we'll tax it, and you get taxed pretty heavily. What we've got here is an invalidity benefit, which is a compensatory payment through our superannuation schemes, being treated as though it's an ordinary retirement benefit and taxed, and being punished, I suppose, for accessing our super. The issue with, in particular for veterans, is that we can't obtain income protection outside of our work because of the nature of the work that we do within the military and the dangers involved. So our income protection is included within our superannuation, and the little known fact is that when we meet a condition of release for an invalidity benefit, our superannuation is foregone. We no longer have any superannuation. So I have no super currently. I'm a recipient of an invalidity benefit. However, it is reviewable and it can cease. It doesn't mean it will. There are instances where obviously those who are severely disabled will never return to the workforce. But with that common law principle, whilst there's a reason that it can stop being paid that payment, it cannot be considered a lifetime pension. With particular point, if I may, just touch on the family law side, the recent legislation that came through basically included a definition of a lifetime pension and includes a military invalidity benefit, and it's still considered a lifetime pension, even if the only reason it's not is the payment can cease. I can guarantee you whoever came up with that legislative instrument or legislative idea, it would never ever affect them in real life. It's unbelievable that that actually came out as policy. So it all comes back to the root cause, and at the moment the way we see it from the veteran community is that there are band-aids being placed on this leaky ship. So rather than looking at why is the ship leaky, why are veterans continuously going to the court and fighting their own government over the treatment of their invalidity benefits, rather than stepping back and going, let's talk to these guys, ladies and men, these veterans of ours, what these issues are. We just seem to be continuously up against this retrospective sort of legislation slapping the Band-Aid on the leaky boat. So what we've asked in our opening statement is this really needs to be looked at. And I know we made some pretty loud statements in our opening statement, but there is reasons behind that. There has been some pretty deceitful actions going on from various areas within government with misleading facts and statements as to negatively affected veterans from the Douglas case who were not negatively affected. They came out saying there were 7,000 negatively affected veterans when in fact there weren't. There was approximately 500. The other issue that, from my point of view, which is glaringly obvious and which has come out in some submissions, is the fact that there isn't anything in legislation to treat an invalidity benefit currently, because the invalidity benefit from day dot hasn't been treated as an invalidity benefit. It's always been treated as though it's a lifetime pension when in fact it's not. So that's why we're asking for a stop and for a thorough investigation of what a military invalidity benefit is and a much fairer way of treating it for all parties involved. I know Senator Sharma asked about family law and what we would like to see put forward. I don't think it's up to the veteran community to I suppose, come up with the ideal scenario of how these benefits should be treated in the family law realm, but we certainly should be a party at the table in discussions going forward. And that's one area that needs fixing. The taxation area needs fixing, because currently we have, as Chris Lower said, we've got a scenario where two veterans can join the military at the same time, be injured in the same way, but get different treatments because they're covered under different superannuation funds. One doesn't pay tax or has a taxation recognition of the compensation aspect of their benefit, one doesn't.
Thank you, Mr Campbell. I am cautious about scope for this hearing, just because as a committee we're only able to report and make recommendations on the specific bill we've been tasked with inquiring before us. Our terms of reference aren't broader than that, and I just want to be clear on expectations around what we can report on and inquire into as part of these hearings. And I appreciate your comments about the broader ecosystem, but I do want to be clear on behalf of our committee of what our power and scope is.
Well, Madam Chair, could I just add to what Mr Campbell said?
Yes, Mr Thornton, yes.
I think you would benefit by way of an example. Any one of the staff in this building could fall down the stairs, have an accident going home, tonight, heaven forbid, touch wood they don't, and then they are forced into early retirement. Now, the risk profile from one end of the spectrum to the other, that's irrelevant. The superannuation system was set up in the mid to late 1980s with an egalitarian intent, and ministerial statements were read out in Parliament to that effect. So here's a real-world situation. That individual, particularly if they're at the lower end of the income spectrum, they'll receive their superannuation. They're actually supposed to receive the future service component of that superannuation tax-free as a compensatory element. So, in other words, if they've served, say, 3 years, they have the accident, and they're snookered for the next, say, 30 or 40 years, then that 30 to 40 years is tax-free within the proportionate parts of the benefit itself. The compensation scheme under CIRCA then tops up to 75%. That was the whole idea behind that. However, the individual has to then continue under CIRCA and DIRCA. This doesn't apply to MERCA, but under CIRCA and DIRCA, so every public servant will suffer this consequence, that under CIRCA they have to continue to contribute at the rate that they were contributing to superannuation as an invalidity benefit. Nobody contributes to their normal superannuation pension. So that 75% is not right. It's actually somewhere between 65%, because the maximum contribution rate is 10%, to 70%. Right. So that's where. So then that tax-free compensatory element of the superannuation, and the reason why it's so important for you to understand this, is that tax-free element is what actually informs Social Security and the Department of Veterans Affairs as to what has to be deducted away from normal income for Social Security purposes. Because, and certainly when this whole framework was put together, the pay rates for veterans and Commonwealth public servants was pretty poor. And that's actually the reason why in 1987 there was the Cook Review that actually revealed the totality of why there was this mass exodus of ADF personnel out of the Defence Force into an economy that had an 8 or 9% unemployment rate. So it's illogical, right? The reason why is because the vast majority of them were pretty well at the poverty line. So that's the reason why this the reason why that framework came into play in the first place, and it hasn't changed. All the evidence you look through, all the law, tax law, superannuation law, compensation law, it is all there. So you can't treat what you're dealing with at the moment separately. It has to actually take into account those very clear guiding principles that were part of the original the original architecture and the framework that sets those whole things up. So, and it became very clear in 1992, because what happened when they introduced superannuation and some of the benefits around, well, not benefits, but some of the concessions around invalidity, people were, at the behest of their accountants and their financial planners, were turning up to their employer and getting a letter of medical retirement for nothing more than a sore toe or a runny nose. So the Parliament then realised that they needed to stitch that up, and that's the reason why they then brought in very strict dichotomy between what is a normal superannuation pension as defined and a disability superannuation pension as defined. They were two very distinct, separate benefits set down in law, and they have continued to progress right up to this day. They have just not been employed correctly by the Commonwealth Superannuation Corporation and that hapless regulator, the Commissioner of Taxation. They've got a lot to answer for, and that's the reason why we are not holding back.
I appreciate that, Mr Thornton. We will put some of the matters you raised to the department. Again, we are limited in our scope of what we are empowered by the Senate to inquire into, but we will put these matters to the department to the extent that we can when we have them here this afternoon. Senator Sharma, did you have further questions for these witnesses?
I just had a couple.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you both. So if I'm understanding your submission and your arguments correctly, the original sin here is treating an invalidity benefit as a lifetime pension. Is that right? Okay. So if I'm a non-ADF member, of civilian in the civilian world, and I take out total permanent disability insurance, so TPD insurance, and I'm injured and I get a payout under that policy, how is that treated at the moment for tax purposes? Is that treated as a lifetime pension, or?
So basically you'll get your lump sum.
Yep.
The future component is worked out, or a modification for disability, and that's your percentage of your total work time that you've missed out on. As a percentage will then be received tax-free. So that's recognition of the compensation aspect.
Yeah.
That's then paid to your super. There are different forms, but this is just very general, and my understanding of it.
Yeah.
That gets paid into your superannuation account, and from there you can purchase an annuity or whatever it may be, and the same percentage of tax-free would be paid on your fortnightly pension or whatever it is that you're paid.
Yeah.
And then that would be treated, that can't be taken away, so that would be treated as a superannuation income stream.
Yeah.
And you would receive a percentage of that tax-free. And then if it's a smallish payment, you could go to social services and apply for a DSP, and the deductible amount would be the compensation aspect.
Yeah.
The point that we're trying to raise here is that we have no recognition of the compensation aspect, so we're missing out on that legislated deductible amount. And what social services is trying to do is this bill is going, well, we're going to treat this invalidity benefit as not a superannuation income stream because it's not lifetime, doesn't meet the very strict requirements, as though it is, and we'll give you a 15% tax offset.
Yeah.
But the 15% tax offset, as we read the law, should apply to the entire taxable component, but it's only applied to the taxable taxed element.
Yeah.
And for a military personnel, for DFIDB, that's zero, because there is no taxable taxed, because it's a completely unfunded scheme. And for MSBS, I think it's only about 3%. So to put into real effect terms for the taxation side, for my Class A invalidity benefit, $60,000 a year. I'm a qualified diesel mechanic. My true earning capacity is probably $200,000. So that's what I'm living on. Under Douglas, my taxes are, so 67% of my invalidity benefit is tax-free. So that brings my taxable income down to $20,000 for the year.
But is that the normal tax rate?
That's the normal
That's
marginal.
the normal tax rate for someone earning $60,000 a year, is it?
Well, normally I would have normally paid around $11,000 a year in tax. All right. So as a superannuation income stream with a 15, that's as a superannuation lump sum, as per Douglas. My taxes, it drops my taxable income by 67% because that's the compensation aspect. So 67% is tax-free because that's the compensation aspect. As a superannuation income stream, I'd get a 15% tax offset on about $2,100 a year, which works out to be a tax saving of $300. So thanks for your service. Here's your $300 tax saving on your compensation, which gives us a really big, warm, fuzzy feeling on the inside. So that's the stark difference. And as a civilian, if I was a mechanic working at BHP, I would get a rather large lump sum. I could buy myself an annuity, and I'd receive 67% of that annuity tax-free, and then also get the 15% tax offset on top of that. And then I would have that payment less the deductible amount assessed for DSP.
So it should be brought parallel to the private sector and insurance arrangements required by occupational health and safety law and liabilities that would be acquired through the court, in your view.
The biggest issue that we've got at the moment is that an invalidity benefit has been treated as though it's a lifetime pension or an ordinary retirement benefit, and that's been done since day dot. So as laws have progressively changed to keep ahead of the various schemes and things that superannuation entities come up with so people can stay ahead of taxation laws, and the government's always playing catch-up. So the various laws that have been enacted have never really dealt with an invalidity benefit because an invalidity benefit's never been treated as anything other than a retirement benefit. So that's what's occurring at the moment with this bill as well. So it's just they're just trying to keep treating it as though it's a lifetime pension when it's not. When in reality, we should be taking that step back and having a look at it and go, well, OK, what is it? And are we actually recognising a veteran's compensation aspect of their benefit, or are we not? And we're saying, well, no, you're not. Yeah. To then say, well, we'll treat it as though it's a superannuation income stream when it's not, and apply the 15% tax offset as the deductible when the 15% tax offset's like $300 for the average. For the average veteran that is going to be applying for a DSP and may actually be entitled to some form of income support, the tax offset's minimal.
I think it's important to understand that the 15% tax offset to the entire taxable component, that was brought in yonks ago, and we've actually got excerpts from tax legislation to show you that just demonstrates this. And so that's the baseline of anybody that turns up and says, I'm unable to work. And you'll see in one of the annexes to a couple of our references where We've illustrated that by a broad envelope of 15% is the entry point for invalidity. And it's when the individual then obtains two doctor's certificates certifying that they are totally and permanently incapacitated. So that's actually a term that was defined in the 1976 Commonwealth Superannuation Act, and basically no Commonwealth officer can be medically retired unless they are TPI. Yet none of us have received that tax-free component to our invalidity benefit. And so therefore, not only have we all missed out on that, but we also have been denied access to the social security entitlements that we would have been entitled to had the correct taxation been calculated and reported as part of that process for social security purposes, both through Services Australia and DVA. DVA and social services, they are collateral damage in this. They are collateral damage because the Commonwealth superannuation has cocked up right at the beginning. And a hapless regulator in 1992, the Commissioner of Taxation, hasn't brought them to heel. Been sitting around with their thumb in the bum, minor neutral. They've just not done what they were supposed to do, and that's caused an unbelievable world of hurt. And I take my hat off to Mr Campbell and the three veterans who prosecuted the Douglas case, because it was actually through that case that the error was eventually exposed. Now, here's the thing, and this is the reason why we come back to this unlawful conduct. The Commissioner of Taxation has a responsibility under his model litigant obligations to have actually informed the court of the evolution of these benefits. And what did they do? They sat there as quiet as church mice and said nothing. Right? So that is a breach of their model litigant obligations. And that has caused an unbelievable amount of hurt, because once the court had the court came up with this idea that, pensions and the date of the 20th of September 2007. That is rubbish. Nobody here that has been medically retired met a condition of release for early retirement for a normal superannuation pension. We met a condition of release for invalidity, and there is an actual separate treatment for that goes all the way back, and it hasn't been applied correctly. And that's the crux of this issue. And so that's the reason why we don't agree with this bill. We need to stop. Everyone needs just to stop and take stock of what's actually gone on here, right? The Schedule 9, we desperately tried to inform the entire Senate, do not go through with Schedule 9. You had DFWA, you had the national peak accountancy associations in this country saying do not put any more Band-Aids on. And what happened? You went and legislated effectively 40 years of theft. So you just, I'm so friggin' angry.
I appreciate that, Mr Thornton. Just one moment, if you can, Senator Sharma.
I just wanted to finish asking my questions, if I could.
Yeah, I will come back to you. Appreciate that, Mr Thornton. I do just need to come back on the matter you raised at the start of your opening statement regarding a referral to the NAC. The advice I have from the Secretariat is, as individuals can make those referrals themselves, it's not appropriate for us as a committee to seek to do that on your behalf, but the Secretariat can provide advice to you as witnesses about those processes, is the advice I've received. We'll discuss that as a committee afterwards as well, but I just wanted to convey that.
I would highlight Rule 13, Senate Rule 13, Senator, that the Senate has been provided false narratives and misleading statements in its conduct, and therefore, in my opinion, as a former senior Commonwealth officer, the Senate has a duty to refer this matter as we have requested. As a collective, I think the Senate really needs to take stock of this.
I will.
I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot here. No one would have expected an opening statement like that, and I understand that. But you need to understand.
I do need Mr Thornton to take advice from my secretariat, and I am the spokesperson of the committee, but I do not make decisions on the committee's behalf either. But on the further matters raised, we'll seek advice as a committee and come to that. Senator Sharma, I'll return the call to you. We've only got a few minutes left, so if I could just ask if we could stick to the scope of the bill in those last questions.
No, I'm very happy to, Chair. Just if I could keep the answer quite briefly here. In your submission, am I reading it correctly to say that you believe the federal court decision in Douglas is plainly wrong? Yes. Paragraph 7 of your submission?
Yes.
Only portion.
Only a portion of it?
Not the whole, not in its entirety. Where it fractures the law, in the sense that pre-2007 is the ordinary meaning of the word. That is not how the Tax Act was enacted. So basically what the ATO put forward to the courts was that prior to 2007, the definition of a pension was the ordinary meaning of the word, and when you go back to Tax Acts, the SIS Act prior to that, there's always been these very strict requirements that a superannuation benefit must meet to be considered a pension, and that comes back to the carrot and the stick. So without meeting it, you don't get your tax-free, and the ATO's come around and said, oh, well, now it's anything, the ordinary meaning of the word, which is not.
Thanks, Mr Campbell. Thank you, Chair. I'm all done.
Thank you, Senator Sharma. I don't have further questions, except I will say, with the matters you've raised, I do need to take advice. The committee needs to take advice with our permanent members as well, and we'll respond to you on those.
It was as much a message to the Senate as a collective as to the committee on we're using you as a vehicle for that.
And I appreciate that, Mr Thornton, but I just am not in a position to respond directly now without seeking advice, but I'll do that, discuss with our committee, and then we will provide a response once we've had the opportunity with that advice to respond appropriately. I would like to thank you both for the effort put into your submission and for your testimony today. I think it's been informative for all of us at the table. As I said, we'll return to you on the matters and issues raised, and the Secretariat is also available to provide advice and guidance on next steps with some of those matters raised, but we'll be back in touch.
Mr Campbell and I are going to try and remain, health permitting, in the House for the rest of the day if other committee members or committee itself here and or any other senator that wishes to actually engage with us. We're making ourselves available at a moment's notice. So if they do want to call Ms Cohen, Secretariat, for our mobile numbers, and then we'll try and make ourselves available. Mr
Thornton. I'll ask the Secretariat to advise that offer to other members of our committee. And we are being broadcast, of course, in the Senate now for others to hear. But thank you very much for your testimony today. You're free to depart the table, and as I said, we'll be back in touch on the substantive matters once we've sought advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Once the witnesses have departed and there's no rush to